my car fixed yet? It's the Studebaker. Yeah, you know, the one with the little doggy in the window that goes...
There's a moment in television history that most people have never seen, and the woman who created it hopes to keep it that way. Carol Burnett, the woman who made America laugh for more than a decade, who turned physical comedy into an art form, who could reduce a studio audience to tears of laughter with nothing more than a raised eyebrow and a perfectly timed pause, has never once sat down to watch a particular episode of her own show. Not when it first aired. Not when critics were falling over themselves to call it brilliant. Not in the 47 years since. And she has been completely clear about why. It was too real. The pain on that screen wasn't a performance. It was her life, dressed up in costume and placed under studio lights for all of America to see. To understand why that episode cut so deep, you have to go back to the beginning. Not to Hollywood, not to Broadway, not even to the bright lights of television. You have to go back to San Antonio, Texas, in 1933, to a small girl who was already learning that the world was not going to be kind to her. Carol Burnett was born on April 26th of that year, and from the very start, her childhood was defined by absence. Her parents were both alcoholics, emotionally unavailable and financially unreliable. Her father drifted between jobs, working for a time in a movie theater but never holding anything down for long. Her mother drank just as heavily and was rarely present in any meaningful way. Both of them would eventually die from illnesses connected to their drinking. By the time Carol was barely old enough to form memories, she had already absorbed one of life's cruelest lessons. The people who are supposed to love you most are sometimes the least capable of doing so. When her parents finally gave up on raising her entirely, Carol went to live with her maternal grandmother, Mabel White. In 1940, the two of them packed up and moved to Hollywood. It sounds like the beginning of a dream, but the reality was far removed from glamour. They lived in a single cramped room inside a rundown boarding house, surrounded by people who were clinging to the edges of their own broken lives. Addicts, the mentally ill, people surviving on welfare and thin hope. Carol and her grandmother got by on $20 a week. That was it. $20 to cover food, rent, and everything else life required. But Mabel gave Carol something that her parents never had. Unconditional love. It was imperfect and limited in every material sense, but it was steady. And in the middle of that chaos, Carol did what children do when the real world becomes unlivable. She invented another one. She created an imaginary twin sister she called Karen. Karen was confident, beautiful, and always happy. Carol would dash up the fire escape, change her clothes and her hair, and reappear as Karen, charming the other tenants of the boarding house. Then she would disappear again and come back as Carol. The fact that grown adults, many of them barely holding themselves together, genuinely believed in Karen says everything about how completely Carol could inhabit another person even at 7 years old. Every Saturday, Carol and her grandmother would go to the movies. 2 tickets cost 25 cents, which was more than 10% of their weekly income. For a few hours inside that darkened theater, everything became beautiful. The screen showed a world where there was food and music and people who loved each other without falling apart. When the lights came back up, reality returned. They couldn't afford toilet paper at home, so they quietly took some from the theater bathroom before leaving. They weren't ashamed. They were simply surviving. Those Saturday afternoons shaped Carol in ways that would only become clear much later. Sitting in the dark, watching performers transform themselves into other people, she was quietly absorbing the foundation of everything she would one day become. By the time she got to UCLA, she had planned to study journalism. Her mother had dreamed of being a writer, and Carol felt a kind of obligation to finish something her mother never could. But a single elective theater class changed the entire direction of her life. Something switched on inside her in that room. She wasn't poor or invisible anymore. She was funny, loud, and completely alive. Her professors noticed. Her classmates noticed. She could sing, act, and make a room collapse into laughter almost simultaneously. Journalism suddenly felt like a small room she had outgrown before she even moved in. She switched majors. By the end of her freshman year, she had been named the most promising newcomer in UCLA's theater program. She made her way to New York, to the rehearsal club, to late nights checking hats at a coat check and days spent auditioning, to a ridiculous love song about Secretary of State John Foster Dulles that somehow became her signature piece and launched her career. From the Ed Sullivan Show to Broadway, from Once Upon a Mattress to the Gary Moore Show, Carol Burnett built something methodically and brilliantly. She understood timing in a way that could not be taught. She understood character in a way that came not from acting classes but from years spent watching real people survive real pain. On September 11, 1967, the Carol Burnett Show premiered on CBS. What followed was 11 straight years of television that nobody had ever quite seen before. 30 million viewers tuned in every single week. 25 Primetime Emmy Awards. A cast that included Harvey Korman, Tim Conway, and Vicki Lawrence, all of whom seemed to bring out something looser and wilder in each other week after week. The show became famous not just for its sketches but for the moments when those sketches fell apart, when Tim Conway's improvised lunacy would send Harvey Korman into helpless, face-buried laughter that no amount of professionalism could suppress. Those unscripted collapses became the beating heart of the show. America tuned in partly to see what would happen when everything went beautifully wrong. But running through the comedy was always something else. Carol Burnett had not grown up laughing. She had grown up using laughter as a tool of survival, a way to keep the weight of her childhood from crushing her entirely. And that history was always there, just below the surface, waiting. One of the recurring sketches on the show was called The Family. Carol played Eunice Higgins, a woman trapped in a small life, weighed down by disappointment, surrounded by a dysfunctional household, and burning with dreams she could never quite reach. The sketch usually mixed comedy with darkness in a way that felt sharp but still safely contained within the language of entertainment. Audiences could laugh because there was always a release valve, always a punchline that let the tension escape before it became something genuinely uncomfortable. In 1977, they removed the release valve entirely. The episode was built around a talent show concept. Eunice, believing with her whole heart that she has a gift, enters a singing competition, convinced that this is finally her moment. This is the thing that is going to change her life. The judges are real. Alan Ludden, a well-known game show host, played one of them, lending the sketch an uncomfortable authenticity. And Carol played Eunice completely straight. No exaggerated accent. No physical gag to soften the blow. No moment where the character winks at the audience. Just a woman who has been told her whole life that she is not enough, standing under bright lights and daring to believe that she might be wrong. The judges mock her. Not cruelly, not cartoonishly. Just with the quiet, efficient dismissiveness that is somehow worse than cruelty because it doesn't even bother to be dramatic about it. Eunice is not devastated in a funny way. She is devastated in the way real people are devastated, quietly and completely. The camera pulled back slowly at the end of the sketch. No music swelled. No laughter track gave the audience permission to feel something lighter. Just Eunice's face, wet with tears, the lights dimming around her, and then nothing. The crew, who had seen Carol Burnett do extraordinary things for years, were close to tears themselves by the end of the taping. When the episode aired, viewers were stunned. Critics called it brilliant. Awards came in. Everyone who saw it seemed to agree that it was something different from anything else on television at the time. A mainstream variety comedy show had somehow produced a piece of television that felt like a gut punch. Carol Burnett never watched it. Not once. In a 2010 interview, she explained why. She said it was too real. That Eunice's pain felt like her own. And she was right, because it was. Everything Eunice felt in that sketch, the humiliation of reaching for something and being laughed at, the particular agony of daring to want more than the life you were handed, Carol had lived all of it. She had been the kid in the boarding house. She had stolen toilet paper from the movie theater bathroom. She had stood in rooms full of people who held the keys to her future and felt the full, terrifying weight of being judged. She had channeled all of that into Eunice, more completely than she had intended to, and what came out was not entertainment. It was Excavation. She later told Harper's Bazaar that she was glad they did it, but that it wasn't what the show was supposed to be. The show existed, she said, to give people a break from their troubles, not to hand them a mirror. And watching that sketch again would mean watching herself disappear into pain she had spent a lifetime trying to outrun. Some performances are too close to the bone. Some truths are too honestly told to be revisited without cost. What is remarkable is not that the episode affected her so deeply. What is remarkable is that she made it at all. Carol Burnett did not grow up in a home where feelings were processed or pain was acknowledged. She grew up in a home where survival was the only available priority. She built her entire career on the ability to transform difficult things into laughter, to take the darkness of her own experience and convert it into something that brought other people joy. The Eunice sketch was the one time she let the conversion fail on purpose. She let the darkness stay dark. And it broke something open in her that she has never quite been able to close back up. The episode did not disappear quietly. It led to a television movie in 1982, and eventually to the spin-off sitcom Mama's Family, which ran for years and introduced Eunice's world to an entirely new audience. Vicki Lawrence, who played Mama, became the center of the spin-off. Carol stepped away from it, unhappy with the direction the character was heading. But the original sketch, the one that aired once in 1977 and that Carol has never watched, remained in a category of its own. It is worth sitting with what it means that America's most beloved comedic performer, a woman who spent over a decade making 30 million people laugh every single week, created her most critically praised work by simply stopping. By refusing to be funny. By standing in front of a camera and letting a character feel, without cushion or protection, what it actually feels like to want something desperately and be told that you are not enough. Carol Burnett's genius was always that she could make the pain funny. In 1977, just once, she made the pain real instead. And the result was so true, so completely drawn from the marrow of her own experience, that she has spent nearly 5 decades unable to watch it. She has said she owes her career to laughter. That it protected her when nothing else could. That it was the thing she invented when the world her parents gave her became impossible to survive. But there is 1 hour of television, filed away in an archive somewhere, that shows what Carol Burnett looked like before the laughter came. And for her, that is not something that needs to be watched again. It only needs to have happened once.